Good evening and welcome to this regular meeting of the Helotes City Council. It's August 9th, 2018, and we're underway at 7 p.m. For those of you that just came in, if you would, if you have a cell phone or other device, if you would put it off silent or vibrate, we'd appreciate it. Starting off our agenda, we have our invocation. Tonight, Councilmember Buys will handle that. And then we'll have the pledges of allegiance to the American and Texas flag. So if you would please stand for the invocation and pledges.
Let us give thanks for all the blessings, opportunities, and challenges you have given us. Guide us with your strength and wisdom so we can make the right decisions for all the citizens of Helotes. With this being the start of our budget season, allow us to have the judgment and resolve to keep our city financially stable while also being fair to our fine employees. As we hear the news of 2 more police officers being wounded in New Jersey, please keep our first responders not only here, but all over the country safe while they perform their unselfish duties. For those that are not able to be with their family and loved ones because of military service, we pray for your quick and safe return. May we give our best always and be assured of your presence with us. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Okay, next up we have a public hearing on the agenda. And we will start this public hearing at 7:02. And just, I'm required to read this, so I'll do that. And did we have anyone sign up to speak? No one signed up to speak, but we'll go ahead and read the public hearing agenda item, and that is to give all interested persons the right to appear and be heard on a request by Eric and Jennifer Sones to replat lots 8 and 9, block 11, CB 54482 of the Iron Horse Canyon Unit H, Phase 1 subdivision into Lot 8, a single lot consisting of 2.31 acres of land on properties located at 14747 and 14781 Iron Horse Way, Helotes, Texas 78023, more particularly described as BCAD property ID numbers 240855 and 240856. Again, no one signed up to speak to this, so we'll close the public hearing at 7:03. That brings us to the next item on our agenda, our open session or citizens to be heard. We do have one person that signed up to speak, and that's Greg Michaud. So Greg, if you would, step up here and state your name and address and tell us who you are representing, whether you're speaking as a private citizen or whether you're speaking as chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
All right, great, thank you. Greg Michelle, 10406 Double Spur Trail. And I'm actually going to speak in both capacities tonight, and I'll start with speaking as the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission to explain the results of the vote earlier this week regarding the item 11, I believe it is for you tonight, regarding moving authority for final approval of conceptual design plans over to City Council. As you know, the history of this is that the Planning and Zoning Commission postponed action for 2 consecutive meetings. The last one I thought was, speaking here personally for a moment, unfortunate. I thought we should have acted in July, but for a variety of reasons, that was not the sentiment of the group. At this meeting this week, the conversation was very much tinged with the sense that there was not a problem to be addressed. People felt that, as you saw the vote, I think it was 6-1, opposing moving that authority to council. The general sense of those people who voted in that way was that there wasn't a problem to be fixed. Some of the concerns were, I thought, well-reasoned, well thought out. They had a decent argument for all the good work that planning and zoning has done. But for others, it was clearly, it hit a nerve. It was taken personally as a sign of disrespect, despite the fact that this council and the mayor's letter back 2-3 months ago indicated that really wasn't what was going on. There was no criticism of the work planning and zoning had done. Nonetheless, the majority felt that it was a position that they did not believe served the city's best interests. The vote was what it was. You have it before you. And I'm personally relieved that you have a vote that came to you. Speaking personally about it now out of my chair role, my sense of it has been that on the issue conceptual design plans, which you have before you tonight, that it makes a lot of sense to have city council have the final word on that, given the significance of those types of issues. But speaking more broadly, and I tried to convey this to my commissioners the other night, was that our role is not diminished. Our work is not devalued by this change. We may not have the final word on certain matters, but our work still counts. Our recommendation still matters. One could argue our recommendation might be more important now because we'll be advising all of you. That's my personal view. I have been very pleased with the group that I have working as planning and zoning, this issue aside. And I suppose one could look at their opposition to this as a sign of the that they like what they do and they would like to retain the power that they had. Understandably, perhaps you could say, but I think the key thing is that they all have generally done a very good job. And it's, I think, served the city very well. As you know, there's several of us there who have been doing it for quite a while. And people have really devoted a lot of time and energy to this. I would close just by reminding you all that we rely on Alex Blue, who's our liaison, to be able to represent what happens at our meetings to you all when there are questions. I also prepare a monthly report based on what we do, and I hope that that's available to you and that that can inform your decision-making as well. So just wanted to share with you how it happened the other night, how this result ended up before you in terms of what it was, and to let you know that I think that this particular item, this moving the conceptual design plan to you all is the right thing to do for the city. So thank you all.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, next up on the agenda is our consent agenda, items 4 through 8 tonight. For those of you that do not know, are not familiar with how a meeting like ours runs, the consent agenda is made up of a grouping of items that are considered fairly routine city business by me and the staff. And our intent is for us to get a motion and a second to approve all of the items with one motion. However, council does have the option to ask questions. If we can answer those questions fairly briefly, we will do so. Or if they want to have a more complete discussion, the council member can request to pull any of the items off the consent agenda, and then they will drop down into the rest of the agenda and be handled as an individual item. So at this time, I would ask if there are any questions or requests to pull any of the items on the consent agenda, items 4 through 8. No questions, no requests to pull, then I would look for a motion and a second to approve consent agenda items 4 through 8.
Mayor, I'd move we have the consent agenda approved for items 4 through 8.
We have a motion from Meadows. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Fredericks. So no discussion being requested. We'll call the question. All in favor of approving consent agenda items 4 through 8, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. That brings us to our items for individual consideration. Item number 9, discussion of and action on a request by Eric and Jennifer Sones to replat lots 8 and 9, Block 11, City Block 54482 of the Iron Horse Canyon Unit H Phase 1 subdivision into Lot 8, a single lot consisting of 2.31 acres of land. So if we can have a motion and a second to discuss and take action on this item, please.
Mayor, I make a motion, we discuss, take action on 9.
We have a motion from Bives. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Blue. So Bert, it's your motion. You're up.
I agree with P and Z's recommendation. They unanimously approved the approval of the request, and I agree with their decision.
Okay, Alex?
I concur completely.
Jim?
No comments?
Cynthia?
Yeah, I'm for it.
Okay, Paul?
I guess the only question I have is, why would they combine in one clock? Did they want to situate the house a little bit differently?
That would be the assumption. They want to build a house and pretty well center it on those
On those two lots?
2 lots.
That's what I was asking. No, I don't have any other comment other than that.
Okay, no further discussion or questions? We'll call the question on item number 9. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0. Number 10, discussion of and action on a request by Valinda G. Guana for approval of a creative wall sign for Old Helotes Inn located at 14405 Old Bandera Road. So again, I ask for a motion and a second.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we discuss and take action on item number 10 as written.
We have a motion from Massey. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Fredericks. Okay, Cynthia, it's your motion. You're up on discussion.
I think the sign looks very nice, and it's appropriately sized for where it's going to be located. I know it's a little bit larger than our ordinance supposedly allows, but I do agree with the P and Z's approval, and so I'm for this.
Okay. Paul?
I agree. I think it fits the building nice, where it's situated on the front of the building. I think anything smaller would be a little bit awkward, so I'm in favor of it.
Jim?
I'm in favor of the sign. The size does not bother me. I think one of the whole reasons, as I understand it, for the special district is so you can allow things of this sort in Old Helotes. And with that in mind, and bowing to our historian, I think that if the sign fits that style, I think it fits right in with the whole concept of Old Helotes.
Alex?
Thank you. I concur that the sign fits. It also, in the planning and zoning, who did a lot more questioning than we're looking at here, also concurred that it's kind of comparable to the sign that was there before when this was Solar Sports. It'll actually be supported on the same structure as the previous sign was. The one caveat, though, that I don't see in the report but was part of the discussion with planning and zoning was the fact that the building currently has an upward-facing light on the roof, and although the application says that the sign is unlit, during discussion, the owner was present and implied that there is being many times an evening event a place. They would kind of like to have it lit, even though it wasn't part of the application. So planning and zoning put as a caveat that they would approve in advance the ability to light it as long as it was downward facing full cutoff according to our lighting ordinance in other areas. And if it's permissible with the maker of the motion and second, I would like to add that caveat to this as well, that if the applicant is interested in having it lit, that it be permitted and also comply with our full cutoff downward facing lighting.
Yeah, I didn't notice that in the notes from P and Z, but it's a good point. Of course, they'd have to comply with the ordinance anyway, but so we'll be amending.
True, but since the
we'll be
application
amending
didn't have it, then they would have to come back with a new request if they decided to have it
Yeah,
lit.
so we'll amend the
Try and
motion.
do it in advance, they don't have to come back.
Okay, Bert?
I'm good.
Okay, Cynthia, anything else you want to amend the motion to include the
Yes.
suggestion by
Yes,
Alex?
because I do see the little light that's there on the roof.
Yeah.
Looking up. So, yeah, I do agree that we should go ahead and
Okay,
allow for the.
So the motion will be amended to include if there's a possibility they're going to put a light on there, that it comply with the lighting ordinance
Lighting
and be a
ordinance.
downward.
The downward, yes.
Yeah, okay. Rick, you have that? Paul, you second that amendment?
That's fine, yes.
Okay. Jim, anything else?
Nope.
Alex? Bert, nothing else? Okay, we'll call the question. All in favor of the amended motion to not only approve the sign, but add the stipulation that if they do lighting at any time in the future, that it will be downward lighting in accordance with the lighting ordinance. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0. Brings us to item number 11, discussion of an action on an ordinance amending Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 98 zoning by providing for the City Council review and approval of conceptual design plans for commercial and single-family residential subdivision developments. If we can have a motion and a second, please.
Mayor, I make a motion, we discuss, take action on 11.
Have a motion from Byes. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Meadows. Bert, you're up.
I thought we already did this.
Not for the zoning. This is, we had to wait to, we did the other
okay,
two,
I'm
the
sorry,
environmental and the,
My mistake.
yeah.
Okay, I would just like to thank Chairman Michelle for coming and clarifying everything. I would like you to pass on to the commission that none of us feel that they are being dissed on or being thought that their duties are any less needed than they are. They are very needed. And thank you for coming and talking to us about that. But I'm in agreement with this agenda item.
Okay, Jim?
My only comments, as I've stated early on, I believe that if we aren't the only, we're one of the few municipalities that does not take action in this fashion on these issues, and I think that we need that. I would also reiterate that this is not in any way to diminish the planning and zoning. If anything, the recommendation will take a stronger on our actions, will have a stronger role in our actions, and so therefore I think that that's something that we'll continue to hear about. I've not been on council long enough to make a statement about the good works, other than what I've heard from everyone, is that the good works of the Planning and Zoning Commission have always been above reproach and always been positive. So I just think that there's no reason for any sense of put down or negative sense to go along with this. Greg, the one thing that was said, I don't think that the power is the same thing as the service provided. I don't think there's the need for power in order to create the service that provides a service to the city. And that's what P&Z is hopefully going to continue to do, is to provide that service. So I'm in favor of the motion, and I'm in favor of the action.
Alex?
I could repeat a lot of what the others have said. We've had conversation in the last several meetings, and I've had an opportunity to address planning and zoning at both of their last meetings, and I find it unfortunate that some still are concerned that this is the wrong action, but I believe that it is the right action to take. Thank you.
Paul?
No, I believe this is the right action to take, and thank you for all the work that P&Z does. Thank you.
Cynthia?
Yeah, I've said a lot over the last several meetings about this, so I'm definitely for this change, this move. And I did want to make the comment that just in this meeting, P&Z gave us recommendations that we concurred with, and that usually happens. I have always strongly listened to what P&Z has told me, whether or not that they were, they've always been advisory, and I've had the pleasure of listening and being the liaison for them for a while too. So this takes nothing away from that at all. I'm still going to be listening to what you all tell us, and taking that into strong consideration before I make any kind of vote. But I am for this change.
Okay, and Greg, I'd like to follow up on what Bert said, and that I put in the original agenda request when this first came to Planning and Zoning and Council, that through the years, everyone has great respect for the volunteers that serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we realize the deliberation that you guys make in that commission and the work that you've put into it. And it's very important to bring those recommendations to council. And as I explained in that original agenda item, this is by no means a reflection on your ability to do what you do as a commission. And I think council has always relied heavily on the recommendations, and like Jim said down there, the recommendations are very important. It might even be more important now because we're going to be looking at making more final decisions. And all of your commissioners hopefully will learn that their responsibility is just as important and vital to the city council. It always has been. It's just that city council, as elected officials, felt like they needed to have more ability to make those final decisions in some cases. So please take that back to your commission, and I intend to write a little follow-up to that and get it to you also. Okay, anything else? Okay, then we'll call the question. An aye vote is to approve the ordinance and to assume final authority on the conceptual design plans for commercial and single-family residential subdivision development. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries. That takes item number 12. This is discussion of and action on an ordinance approving the execution of a consent for modification letter authorizing the installation and co-location of T-Mobile equipment within an existing cellular tower located on the municipal complex. So if we can have a motion and a second to discuss and take action on item 12, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve, or we discuss and take action on item 12.
We have a motion from Fredericks. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Buys. Paul, your motion, so you're up.
No, I'm all for it. The more we can get on that tower, and the better. It's better than putting it over here across the street.
That it?
That's it.
Bert?
Yeah, I agree with Paul. I just had one question. Since, is this tower now gonna be full of the subtenants?
Yes.
It's gonna be completely full, there's no more that can be added?
That's my understanding.
That's my understanding as
Because there was that one section that was available, but that wasn't enough for Verizon, but it's evidently enough for T-Mobile.
Okay, all right, that's the only question I had. I'm for it.
Alex?
I'm for it as well, but I have a question. I'm a little bit confused because as I look at the one part, it talks about within an existing cellular tower and enclosure. And then when I read the documents that are attached, I see that there's an additional 40 by 40 square feet and a second tower that's being constructed. So the two don't seem to be consistent. Am I missing something? One says within the existing tower, the other says we're adding a second tower.
Are you talking about the two different agenda
Yeah,
items?
they're two different agenda items. The next agenda item is for a second enclosure.
Okay.
This
Okay.
particular item is just for
Because I
the-
was reading them, and there's an awful lot of technical data here.
Yeah, this agenda item is strictly for T-Mobile to be a subtenant
Of the current one.
of the
and-
current tower.
I got you. Then I'm all in favor. Thank you.
Okay, Jim?
No, I have no further question. I had the same question.
Okay, Bert? Did I?
No,
Oh, I already got you. Cynthia?
I know, I'm for it.
Okay. No further discussion evidently required. Any discussion, anything else?
Can I say something?
Sure.
Weren't you the one that came up with this idea to check and see if there was some more room?
Mhm.
Okay, well, thank you.
Originally. We got them together.
You got them together.
We got them together. and
That's what mayors are supposed to
They
do.
worked it out.
Good job. All right.
Okay. No further discussion. We'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. That takes us now to item 13, which is discussion of an action on an ordinance approving the execution of a proposed new construction site lease agreement term sheet authorizing the installation of a second cellular stealth tower and enclosure adjacent to the existing cellular tower and enclosure located on the municipal complex. And again, when the other one came up, we suggested this, or you suggested this as an alternate, and like I say, we got those two together, and it's taken them a while, but they got it all worked out, and seems to be a very viable plan.
But is this the same provider then that's going to be using this?
the same Crown Castle Communications will own both stealth towers, and then with this second one, the primary subtenant will be, or tenant, I guess, would be Verizon.
That's what I meant.
And then there'll still be space
For others.
for others, and as the agreement says, each one that's added, it will add to our income by 15% of whatever that contract is.
So when we create our own TV channel, we can put it right on the tower then, isn't it?
You bet, we may have a satellite dish, you never know. Okay, so I'd ask for a motion and a second to discuss and take action on item 13.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move that we have discussion and take action on item 13.
Motion from Meadows, do we have a second?
Second.
Oh, he beat you.
Okay.
A second from Fredericks. Okay, so Jim, your motion, so you're up on this one?
I have no further questions. We just discussed it in the informal briefing here, so I'm in favor.
Okay, and just to be sure you have it, this is gonna be just adjacent to the one that's there and be a carbon copy, basically. And as stipulated in here, we added that they're gonna light it like the other one, that AT&T did years ago, and it will be rigged, and they'll put a Texas flag up there, so we're back in business with both the US and the Texas flags.
I assumed that was going to happen, or else it wouldn't have been on the agenda.
Right. Paul?
I really didn't have any questions. I guess it did talk about easements, I guess, to the left of the playground, and now they're gonna have the easements to the right of the playground? Is that just for in and out?
Yeah, it's just gonna be for access for their, because they bring pickup trucks in, and they'll go through the parking lot next to the playground and come around the back rather than go between the police parking lot and the fence to the playground. And what they're gonna do is get rid of that easement and dedicate it back to the city, and we'll use that.
That's all I have. That's all I have.
Cynthia, anything?
No, I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Bert?
How many subtenants are in a cell tower?
It depends, because each one might take a little different space. And they
okay.
come and go. So typically, as I recall from previous discussions, it's gonna be somewhere in the area of 4.
Okay. All right.
If they take a larger area, we get a larger revenue.
Yeah, whatever they take, whatever that contract is,
percentage, yeah.
15% of that will come to the city as revenue.
That was just FYI. Thank you. That's all I need.
Okay, Alex, anything?
No, the only question I had was that the terms of the contract are comparable to the terms on the existing tower as far as monetary.
The terms are better.
Yeah, actually, it's a little higher. They came to us originally with an offer of $1,600 a month for a total of $19,200, and we countered with $2,000 a month, and they accepted that. We asked also, instead of compounding every 5 years at 15%, that they compound 3% a year. They didn't really say they were opposed to that. They just left it at 15 for 5. It's a very small difference in the compounding, so we didn't really go back since they decided to go ahead with the 2,000 rather than 1,600.
I'm fine with it, thank you.
Okay, Jim, any follow-up?
No, sir.
Paul?
No, I'm good.
Cynthia? Bert? Any follow-up? Okay, so an aye vote will be to approve this second tower. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. That takes us to item 14. This is a presentation and discussion on the proposed City of Helotes fiscal year ending 2019 budgets, including but not limited to all of those items. I know Rick has been grinding out his PowerPoint, so I'll hand these out. Rick, I have some extras. Did you?
That's it.
The public have a good budget in color.
Scott, you want to come up and get these and see if anybody wants one? Otherwise, they'll follow along. Sorry, Fire Chief Moreland. Hand that down. This is always one of the most exciting parts of the year to me. Rick Schroeder, our city council, our city administrator, has been working on this and really crunching numbers. And I've added my comments with red ink, and we've worked our way through this over the last month or so. Each department has given their input and request, and we've considered all of that. Some made it, some didn't. And I'd like to reiterate that the budget that you're looking at now is balanced. It comes to you balanced, and as always, and Rick will cover this, prior to tonight, it's considered the mayor's budget, because the mayor of a city like ours is the budget officer, and it's his or her responsibility to bring the budget to the council, and from this point forward, it's yours to do with as you feel you need to. And no further ado, I know Rick's been rehearsing all day.
Mayor, is that yours? That book? Is there an extra one floating around somewhere? That's yours.
Oh, we didn't want you to have one. I lost
You
track.
asked too many questions.
I thought he had given me an extra one like he did the PowerPoint deal. Okay, Rick.
All right. Good evening. It is my pleasure to present Mayor Schoolcraft's budget to y'all tonight. We've been working on this budget for probably a month now, and we've got it to the place where it's balanced, which of course is the most important thing when it comes to a municipal budget. So I'm going to hit the highlights of this budget document. I'm not going to go through every single page with you tonight because I know that y'all have not seen this yet. But generally speaking, the budget is balanced, which means that the revenues match the expenditures. Or it could also mean that the revenues exceed your expenditures. Either way is essentially balanced in the eyes of the state. The proposed budget before you maintains the current ad valorem tax rate, which is 0.35 per $100 valuation. So we're not going up at this point, and we're not going down at this point. The interest and sinking tax rate, when you break this up, it's comprised of interest and sinking and maintenance and operating. Maintenance and operating is what we use to operate the city through the general fund or the general operating fund. Interest and sinking is the amount of tax that we collect that then gets put into the debt service fund for debt service, debt payments, lease, capital leases, things of that sort. In next fiscal year, we are expecting that the ad valorem revenues will increase by approximately $132,000. This is primarily due to new property being added to the tax roll. It's not because valuations in the city of Helotes just increased tremendously. Actually, about $113,000 of the $132,000 is due to new property. So a very small amount is due to increased valuations. As the mayor said, going through this is going to be a fluid process like it is every year. So we present to you tonight, August 9th, there's another meeting in August, and then there's 2 meetings in September. Each time that we bring this budget back to y'all, the revenues and the expenditures will be updated to reflect current conditions. The thought is that as we get to the end of September, and we adopt it, I believe, on the 28th or 27th, that is the most accurate number that we can get to when we adopt a budget, because we have receipted all revenues and we have expended a majority of the expenditures. Within the budget document, there are 3 ways that we adjust these numbers to reflect the remaining 2 months of the year. We either look at them at a fixed dollar amount, which means we know how much revenue or how much expenditure we're actually going to spend now over the next 2 months. Typically those are like contracts or leases. They could be annualized, which means that we could annualize them to 10 months. We're at the 10-month mark and we could annualize them to 12 months to essentially guesstimate what those revenues and expenditures are. Or we could simply take a percentage up or a percentage down. The question came up about the ad valorem tax rate, which is again 0.35. If council elected to go up or to go down in that tax rate, what you would be looking at is for a half cent, you're essentially talking about $44,000, either plus or minus, depending on if you go up or if you go down. A full cent would be approximately $88,000, which makes sense. You're going from a half cent to a full cent. And again, up or down, you're either adding or subtracting $88,000 to our expected revenues. Again, the budget that's presented tonight to y'all is for 0.35, which is our current tax rate. I have had some comments on Facebook about city staff is proposing a higher tax rate than 0.35. At the end of this meeting tonight, you're going to be adopting or setting a tax rate that you're proposing to adopt at the end of September. The reason that staff always proposes something higher, which is essentially the rollback rate, is that gives council over the next 2 months the wiggle room to raise the tax rate if it becomes necessary. Let's say there's a disaster a month from now and we have to raise taxes to take care of that disaster. It only allows you wiggle room to go up to the maximum amount that you can go up before the rollback rate sets in. But again, this budget, as presented, is at the current tax rate. Within the city's finances, there are a number of funds. There's actually 11 funds that we have throughout the city. The first one, of course, is the general fund. That is for maintenance and operating, and it's an unassigned fund, which means it can be used for anything the city spends money on. The FY19 projected beginning balance, which is the amount of money that we're projecting to have in the general fund at the end of this fiscal year, which is for next fiscal year, is about $2 million. The debt service fund is restricted. Now what that means is that we can only use that money when we collect it. We can only use that money for debt service or capital lease payments or anything that's essentially got a principal and interest component to it. The capital replacement fund is committed, meaning that it's quasi-restricted, quasi-committed. Council can put money into the capital replacement fund for future purposes. It can basically take money from the general fund and put it in the capital fund for some time in the future if it needs to. It can also be restricted in the sense that if you take out certificates of obligation, you're obligated to spend those monies on those projects that you have told the public that you're going to spend them on. The capital replacement fund, beginning fund balance for next year is a little over $500,000. The debt service fund, by the way, is about $169,000 projected for next year. Now we have the municipal court security and technology funds. Security essentially handles what it says, the municipal court security of the building and of the judge and of the prosecutors. Technology is for software or ticket writers or things of that sort that municipal court or the police department would use in processing tickets, citations, or ordinance violations. Both of those are restricted, and their projected beginning balances for next year are a little over $16,000 and approximately $11,000 respectively. The public access fund is also restricted. This is money that we receive reluctantly from cable companies that we can use to essentially broadcast live through the system that we have in place currently. Right now, we're expecting that we'll have about a little over $70,000 in that fund at the end of this fiscal year. Police training and education funds, those are funds that can only be used, again, on police training or education. We're looking at approximately $4,700 at the end of this fiscal year. School safety. School safety is also a restricted fund. It can be used primarily for school crossing guards, crosswalks, lighting for crosswalks, things of that sort. We've also used school safety funds for when the police and fire departments go out to the schools and they purchase through their little trinkets or things so that the kids can remember kind of what the lesson was for. Dial 911 would be a good example. In that budget, we're talking about approximately $50,000 at the end of this fiscal year. The state forfeiture fund is restricted. It can be spent through the authorization of the police chief, and that is essentially what it's forfeiture money that the city has received from the state. because of a crime dealing with property. A lot of times you're talking about vehicles, well, I guess you couldn't do anything with seized drugs, but seized vehicles or seized equipment. Right now you have a little over $11,000 in that account. The street maintenance fund, this is one of the newest funds we have. Throughout the year, we bring in, this year we have about $700,000 or $800,000 worth of capital improvements going on through that fund. But at the end of this year, we're looking at about $81,000 left over after all the street improvements that we're doing this year, which essentially hits almost every neighborhood in the city of Helotes. The hotel occupancy tax fund is the newest fund that we have. It's restricted and it can only be used for convention and visitor bureau type activities. The reason that we don't have a hotel currently in the city of Helotes, but we do have a lot of Airbnb and those types of facilities. And so this money, it's not much, but it's a start, and we're starting to collect it on a quarterly basis. And lastly, the Economic Development Corporation. It is a governmental fund, so it's a part of the city's finances, but it is, as you all know, it's governed and by an independent board of directors. Council has to approve their expenditures, and we do that on an annual basis through the budget process. But it is a restricted fund that can only essentially be used for economic development purposes. And you're talking about a little less than $1 million at the end of this year in that fund. Now the big thing that everybody wants to know is what's going to happen with personnel this year. Or what's proposed to happen with personnel, I should say. The budget that is before you does not include any new staff members for any department at this point. It does allow in certain areas additional monies for some contract labor, but it doesn't include any full-time or part-time additions to the salary chart. In prior years, and this is significant, in prior years, the percentage of salaries to the overall budget was a little over 70%. Now when you take salaries compared to revenues or expenditures, because those are the same numbers, it's about 61% of the annual budget. The question is why? It's because of the increase in sales and use tax through the 380 agreements that we have in place. So as revenues increase and salaries and benefits rise but stay at a relatively normal rise, it has dropped for this year the percentage to 61%. And the goal that we have always had is to be at or under 70%, so we feel very comfortable with this percentage at this time. There are 2 new certifications. They're nominal that are included within the certification chart. One is for Public Works. We added in a commercial driver's license certification. We now have 2 vehicles that are required to be driven by the state with a person who has a CDL driver's license. The problem with that is it's very difficult to recruit people to have them get a CDL because there are additional state requirements. If they get a ticket, it's much more cumbersome for them. And so we've added in a nominal $300 certification fee or certification for Public Works. We also added in 3 certifications for human resources. Human resources can be certified through the Institute, I believe it is the Institute for Human Resources at various levels. And so we've added in, it's 3 different levels, and we've added in, like everybody else, $300, $600, and $900 for those certifications. But those are the only certifications that we've included new within the budget document. The big thing that everybody always wants to know about is what are we doing with merit and cost of living adjustments. What we have in the budget presented to you tonight is a 3% citywide lump sum per department, which consists of a 2% cost of living adjustment and a 1% merit. The cost of living, I've always stated that the cost of living adjustments should be comparable to the Consumer Price Index. And so from April of 17 to April of 18, the cost of living, or the CPI, increased 2.4%. So we've included generally a 2% cost of living and a 1% merit for a total of 3. And this was consistent with what we did last year with the budget that was approved by council. And lastly, we've added in for the Texas Municipal Retirement System, we've kept everything the same with the exception of adding an ad hoc updated service credit. And I don't really want to go into a lot of detail about what that is tonight. We did that last 2 meetings ago, I believe. And I think all of us are still somewhat confused about what an updated service credit is, but essentially it calculates future retirement based upon current salaries. If you worked here, if you started here 5 years ago and you've increased your salary considerably over the last 5 years, your future retirement benefits are now based upon your current salary, not where you were 5 years ago when the city last updated its updated service credit. I was also asked by Mayor Schoolcraft what the cost for that is. It's relatively nominal. It's about $3,800 to $4,000 for the implementation of that updated service credit on an ad hoc basis. There was some, I think, confusion about the $18,000 figure that I gave before. That was a different plan. That wasn't just updating the one-time updated service credit. The other component here is, and this varies from year to year, we've had years where it was as high as 25% increase year over year, and this year it's actually relatively nominal, I guess, in the healthcare industry. With dental, we're looking at, by staying with Humana, where you're looking at a 12% increase year over year in dental costs. So the current, and by the way, the city covers the full 100% of the dental coverage for the employee, medical coverage for the employee, and vision for the employee. Now, we don't cover family members or spouses, but we do cover the employee themselves. So dental is going to increase from about $21 to $23.50. Medical is expected to increase 4% from the $408 to the $424, and these are monthly charges, by the way. And vision, there is no change in the vision rate because we signed a 2-year contract, or we were guaranteed a 2-year grace period last year. Now,
This is per employee.
this is per employee per month. So, for example, we're at about $5,000 per employee per year to provide them health insurance. So I put at the very end, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a freight train. The reason I put that there is we actually just received yesterday a comparable quote from Blue Cross Blue Shield with a several $100 savings monthly to the city and also to employees that have spouses and families on their plan. And so depending on whether we actually get that as a formal quote, we may be recommending changing the healthcare insurance to Blue Cross Blue Shield rather than Humana to realize that savings. I think we probably all generally agree that Blue Cross Blue Shield in Texas is a good, reputable health insurance company. So I wouldn't see any good reason for pushback on that, but just to let you know what may be coming up. General fund revenues. So projected general fund revenues at the end, for next year are projected to be about $7.6 million. This is a 15% increase year over year, and again, that is primarily related to non-property taxes. Non-property taxes are sales taxes, or primarily sales taxes. You can see that property taxes, we're estimating about $2.8 million in property tax specifically for maintenance and operations. That doesn't include the debt service property tax that we receive. Okay, it's only for the maintenance and operation. We're expecting to receive about an additional $900,000 to cover debt service for next year. Non-property taxes, we're at about $2.4 million. Franchise fees, $787,000, so on and so forth, for a grand total of, again, $7.6 million, which is a 15% year-over-year increase. The other thing I'll point here is that we're becoming very close, we're getting very close to a balance of property tax and sales tax, which, as you know, we have tried doing that for some time, at least over the last 5 to 10 years, And it is becoming a reality that our property tax and our sales tax are equating out to the same percentage overall.
Rick, does the BMC go into the sales tax, or is that in one of the other areas?
That goes into sales tax.
Because that's a huge increase for us.
That's primarily what it is.
What was your question? The what?
The monies from the
millworks.
BMC millwork.
Okay.
Yeah, that's primarily what the increase in sales tax is due to. Projected general fund expenditures.
I'm
Go
sorry
ahead,
to
go ahead.
interrupt you, I'm sorry. What was the, do you remember what the sales tax projections were for last year? I'm sorry to throw that at you.
I don't remember, but I can certainly,
Okay.
well, I do, I can tell you what they were.
Because I know we're having that shopping center come in.
This fiscal,
I started looking at that too, and I didn't take the time today.
at the end of this fiscal year, or for this current budget, we budgeted, we budgeted 1.7 million
For sales tax?
in sales tax at the end of this fiscal year, or at the beginning of this fiscal year, and we're gonna result in 2.4. The projected year end is 2.4. So we're talking about $700,000 in unbudgeted revenue. Now,
Yeah.
let's not get too excited, because remember, there's 75% of that we have to pay back to BMC. So it's a significant chunk, but I'm gonna explain here why on the expenditure side, we have an abnormal increase in expenditures as well. So, go ahead.
Yeah, just to follow up on that last point you made about the balancing of the two, I know, and you mentioned 5 to 10 years, at one point, our property tax revenue, the state recommends a 30-30 split for a total of 60%, 30 coming from property tax, 30 coming from sales tax, and the balance of 40% coming from the other fees that the state allows us to collect. At one point, our property tax was over 50%, and our sales tax was under 20%. And our goal, long-term, has always been to get that 30-30 split. And as Rick said, now we're getting very, very close to at least being balanced. And it is exciting to see that we're actually getting where we were hoping to be, starting about 8 years ago. So carry on.
On the flip side, looking at expenditures, again, because this is a balanced budget, the revenues do match the expenditures here. So the expenditures are again $7.6 million, which is a 15% year-over-year projected increase from this year. The reason for that is primarily this, and I hate it that it's under my line item, but it's under administration, and then a little bit is due to buildings and grounds. The reason that this has increased significantly from a little less, if I recall, less than $1 million to 1.8 for next year is due to the receipt and the rebate back to BMC Millworks for the 75% of the sales tax that's collected. The city keeps 25% of the increased value, 100% of the street maintenance, by the way, that's collected, and we rebate back the rest to BMC. Overall, though, it has been a very good partnership with BMC because it has allowed us to do a considerable number of other things that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. On the expenditures, so for administration, you're looking at 1.8 million, and then you just simply go around the wheel.
And you're also including the grant payment back to Brycewood off the property tax. That's also part of your...
Yeah, there's Brycewood, there is Slim Chickens, there is BMC, and there's another one that I'm missing right now.
The two big ones, though, are Brycewood and...
Yes, sir.
And BMC West.
So looking at the city overall, you have 3 general areas that comprise most of the budget. It's administration, it's fire, and it's police, which is comparable when you look at any city out there in Texas at least. Administrative accomplishments. So what I always like to do is talk about what we've done well this year and what we're going to try to do well next year by allocating dollars to particular areas of the city. Under administration, we did have a successful audit with 0 deficiencies. We have had significant social media presence on all of the social media outlets over the last year. Our likes on Facebook are a little under 15,000, which is significantly higher than any other suburban municipality out there. So I am very proud of the fact. Now, that doesn't count San Antonio, but it does include all the suburban municipalities. We are currently seeking comptroller financial transparency recognition. We expect to have that by the end of this fiscal year. It'll be a nice aspect or celebration, if you will, when we go through the audit process. We'll be also recognized by the comptroller's office, hopefully, for that financial transparency recognition. We have digitized all personnel records within human resources. We are currently implementing what you call ExecuTime, which a number of years ago, council, and several of y'all were on council at that time, approved time clocks for the city. We are just now implementing that, and it's ExecuTime. It'll work seamlessly with Encode, our payroll software. We're first rolling that out into the administrative departments, getting all the tweaks. We're tweaking it essentially to make sure it works correctly, and then over time, we'll be releasing that to the entire city. Within human resources, they had 13 job postings throughout the year and 262 applications that they were culled through. We created a job portal for the city, both internally and externally. Human resources had 20 new hires, and we had 13 resignations. Even resignations we have to process. Municipal Court. Municipal Court received a traffic safety award from TxDOT this year. They were also recognized by the Texas Municipal Courts, I forgot the acronym here, but it's essentially the Texas Municipal Court Clerks Association. They were recognized by that group. Warrant Roundup, we collected approximately $24,000. We also implemented CGIS and Omnix within our municipal court so that they can do requisite checks that are allowed by the state for courts. We did pass a CGIS audit, both in dispatch, and CGIS, by the way, is Criminal Justice Information Systems. When an officer is behind you and they run your plate because you're speeding, they're utilizing CGIS information. So both dispatch, the police department, and municipal court passed our CGIS audit this year. This year we've had the largest continuing street maintenance program in the city's history take place. Many of y'all's neighborhoods are seeing the fruits of that, either through one course treatments, overlays, or Omnix, which is being applied on top of the one course treatment. We have a fitness park walking trail that has been completed by our Public Works Department. We are completely compliant with MS4. MS4 is an EPA requirement that we routinely clean and maintain our storm sewer systems throughout the city. Now, some people say we don't have a storm sewer system because we don't have a lot of neighborhoods that have curb streets. Well, a sewer system also includes the culverts on the side of the road and all of the drainage structures that are under roads. So we do have a sewer system. We completed 2,800 public works tasks. All of the public works employees are NIMS certified, which is a emergency management certification program through FEMA, I believe, or the Department of Homeland Security, I can't remember. But all of them have been certified as emergency responders. Within animal control, we had 83 animals impounded. 1/3 of them were returned home, and the rest were placed in foster care until they were adopted out. Within development services, we had a little over 1,300 permits issued, and we had 240 business licenses issued this year. And all of these numbers, by the way, are up to basically August 1st. So as we continue on, we still have 2 or 3 more months left to add to these numbers. And lastly, the dispatch department up to today has processed 5,557 calls for service.
Rick, when does the street maintenance tax, what ballot is it going to be on, this May's?
Yes, sir. It'll be on the, We're shooting for the May ballot.
Technically, the 4 years would be in November,
Yes, sir.
but we're,
You can do it early.
we're proceeding forward to put it on the May ballot so that, assuming we may have an election, and that way we won't have to have a special election in November.
Okay.
Having that election earlier, though, doesn't mean you negate the length of time that's still left in the 4 years.
So you still get the 4 years from
You still get the
November.
4 years, you're just having an election early.
Okay.
This budget that's presented to you tonight and notated on the notes section within each of the budgets does have what we call investments in our community. The first one is investing in the Old Town Helotes Special District pedestrian bridge. I think we're almost to the point where we can start construction maybe in the next 3 months. Right now, it's going through the San Antonio River Authority review process to ensure that we can essentially build the pedestrian bridge where we would like to build it. We have considerable monies invested in information technology, both maintenance and additions to our current network and server environment. And we have included monies for Wi-Fi connectivity in all municipal buildings here. That was one of the things that we had included in last year's budget, but because certain things didn't wound up costing more than they did, we couldn't afford it this year, and so I've lumped monies in for next year for that. Training. Every administrative department has a training budget included within their department. Some are smaller than others, but that's because some departments only have 2 people and some have 10. It goes by number, essentially. Within the city secretary's office, we've added money for codification and transparency. Codification, what these monies would be used for would be our current municipal code of ordinances that's online. Essentially, we have upgraded to a system that places ordinances on there as they're adopted, but it may take a while for them to be codified. So people before were not able to see if council, for example, tonight y'all changed the zoning code. That will now go up on Monday onto MuniCode, which is our repository for our code of ordinances, where in the past it would have not gone onto the website, nor would it have been codified. So it goes up as an ordinance until it's codified. It's essentially trying to make people aware of what's going on here at the city. We've added monies from municipal court security and transferred those to the general fund for bailiff and warrant officers. We've added, as you all know, we've added additional monies, and we've also added additional alternate court judges. And we have included money within the Municipal Court Technology Fund to completely upgrade their MCRS software that they use. It would still be using MCRS, but they've been using it for 8 to 10 years in its current format, and it needs to be updated to keep up essentially with the times. Streets and drainage. Within the street maintenance fund, we have close to $700,000 budgeted in there for next fiscal year for additional street improvements. And we have money within the general fund for street and drainage improvements that can't be paid out of the street maintenance fund. A good example is street signs. Street signs can't be paid out of street maintenance funds. I think they just left it out at the state legislature level when they adopted that code. But there are things like that that can't be paid out of street maintenance funds, and so we've included those dollars within the general fund. This fiscal year, we did have money in the budget for a public works building, the construction of an actual department, but a metal building where they can store additional equipment and supplies. And also so that they can kind of clean up the back area. If you notice, when we have movie nights and events, there are piles of things back there. Never liked that, and so we would like to put those in a metal storage building that has a foundation and front and rear doors. We've also added money in here for equipment within the Public Works Department. And I'm going to go through the budget document with you in just a second, but the equipment that we've added in to date has been for concrete saws, edgers, backpack blowers, street striping machine, and mobile fuel tank and trailer. And again, I've already talked about the metal building. All of those things, again, are notated in the budget document that you have before you so that you'll know where they're located. Event security. A lot of our events that we have around town, not here so much on the municipal complex, but those particularly in Old Town, we have plastic barricades that separate pedestrians from vehicular traffic. One of the things that we're concerned about is somebody running into those events with their vehicle. And so what we've included in here is monies to essentially install bollards throughout the Old Town District in key areas where we have the boundaries of certain events, like for Jazz Fest or for the Marketplace event, things of that sort. And lastly, we've added dollars in here for parks and recreation activities and equipment, and additional monies in there for the band as well.
Rick,
Yes.
on Parks and Recreation, we already budgeted for the restroom at the park, right? Or is this money's gonna be in this year's budget for that?
My suspicion is that would come out of this proposed budget, because I don't think we're gonna get there in time, but I may be wrong.
Or the certificates of obligation will allow us
Well,
to do
and
that too.
we could use that as well.
Because that was one reason we lumped them into the linear park system, was so that we could use the C of O money and not have to take money out of the general fund.
That is correct.
That's the 2015 C of O money.
Yes, sir. Police Department. The Police Department has had accomplishments throughout the year as well. The first one would be that they have upgraded a significant amount of equipment in their department. They have a 100% homicide conviction rate here in the city. They have applied and received for a rifle-resistant vest grant. They are an avid National Night Out participant. They have increased the number of cleared cases through their CID, or Criminal Investigations Division. Burglary and theft has decreased in the city of Helotes, and all bank robbery suspects that occurred over the last year have been found and detained. So what are we looking at in the police department in the way of significant investments? The first one would be the HVAC, or the air conditioning and heating equipment in that building. Unfortunately, it appears that we have a similar situation in the police department that we had occurring in the fire department. And that is primarily due to not conditioning outside air. And of course, the mayor, being a builder, can elaborate on this if you would like. But essentially, the system wasn't conditioning outside air coming into the building before it got dropped or placed into the air conditioning units. So what this would do would be to retrofit the entire HVAC system in the police department. And doing so, we've already received quotes from our contract AC company, would be approximately $120,000. That's the top end. I think the low end was about $10,000 less than that. So it just depends, but anywhere between $110,000 and $120,000.
Rick, on that note, are you saying that it wasn't over-engineered like the fire station was? Has a study been done on that? Because that was the...
We have had a complete study done on the police department.
And it wasn't over-engineered like the other one, because it was the same people that did it, I think.
All I can tell you is that the same problems that we had in the fire department, we're having in the police department.
Yes, sir. I would figure that.
There wasn't the dramatic difference in over-engineering, but there was some, as I recall from the study.
Okay.
Training. We've increased the funding for training within the police department and for training within the facilities that we have here. Again, as I told you, there are monies for training within the general fund and also in the restricted fund under the police training fund, police training and education fund, excuse me. Thirdly, we have placed money in their account or in their fund for scene reconstruction. This would apply to both crime scenes and also traffic accidents. It's a camera and software system that allows our criminal investigations division to more accurately and more efficiently get schematics of crime scenes and vehicular crashes. And lastly, we've added in 3 CID vehicles. The CID vehicles, they have currently are either not working or extremely old and high mileage. And so we've added in there 3 Ford Fusions. We're not recommending full police interceptor units, but Ford Fusions, because they do essentially just drive between here and downtown for the Bexar County Detention's Office, magistrate, all those sorts of things.
Question. I saw in the Helotes magazine that there was, that Officer Holt has a dog right now. Are we adding a K-9 division or a K-9 capabilities to our police department?
To answer your question, no, not at this time.
Okay, it's not even on, we're not even considering it?
Not at this time.
Okay.
I would like to just point out that we're not looking at purchasing any new patrol units, the Explorers. We got 2 new ones in this year, and the highest mileage on the oldest of the 8 that we have in service is around 75,000. We typically shoot for a 4-year term, figuring 25,000 miles a year, which will put, going into next year's budget, the following year's budget, we'll probably have to replace at least 2 at that point, but we don't need any this year.
On top of that, you also notice that within the general fund budget, you're not going to see monies allocated for the vehicles that we currently have, and that is because, or the payments that we have to make for next fiscal year, that is because I've moved those dollars to the debt service fund and not paid them out of the general fund. And that includes the 3 additional vehicles for CID. Again, anything that essentially has a principal and interest payment can be paid for out of the debt service fund. Fire department and EMS. On the fire side, they continue to have FireWise community designations. I believe right now, and again, the fire chief is here if I'm incorrect, but right now they have a designation within the Los Reyes Canyon subdivision, and they also have a designation with Iron Horse Canyon. They continue to work on the Government Canyon fuel reduction, which is the break between, or the timber break, whatever you want to call it, between the Government Canyon State Natural Area and Los Reyes, so that if fire was to encroach onto Los Reyes, there would at least be a break for it not to cross, or hopefully not cross. They have added or received training and safety grants throughout the year for equipment and obviously for training. They have increased their fire code and construction enforcement, and actually we have made who was a deputy fire marshal, Eddie Haynes, into the fire marshal for the city of Helotes. Lastly, for fire, they did have a successful Texas Commission on Fire Protection review, and essentially that's like an audit to make sure that the department is up to standards with the state.
Rick, could I just comment, the FireWise in Los Reyes has been a huge success as far as getting people to not just working next to Government Canyon, but around their homes, getting them to create a safe space. And the cooperation with the fire department has been excellent, working on FireWise, and we're a very active community in that respect. So. Good. Under EMS, they have 5 medics that are now trained in tactical combat casualty care. They are a member of, or a participant in the Drug Enforcement Agency's National Take Back Initiative, and they have updated recently their standard medical operations procedures in working with the medical director, Craig Manifold. They recently had a success through the Drug Enforcement Agency by allowing them to destroy all the medications and narcotics that they have left over from ambulance activities, and so that they're counting as a plus. And they have undergone or engaged in numerous public education programs, whether it be from the schools to communities such as Iron Horse Canyon and Los Reyes. Significant investments. So within the entire budget, perhaps the most significant investments that we're making next year are within the fire and EMS departments, or we're proposing to make within those departments. Number 1 would be replacing engine 1. Number 2 would be
replacing, but it's really refurbishing Medic 2. And then the last one, we are making a significant payoff payment in EMS equipment that we financed several years ago. That being the Lucas chest compression device, which is, they have 2 of those, and the PhysioControl LifePak 15 cardiac monitors, and they have 3 of those. There's about $50,000 left on those payments, and so as a part of this budget, we have proposed to pay those balances off. But let me go back to Engine 1 and Medic 2. Engine 1, what they're looking at is a KME Pro Series rescue pumper. As proposed or as designed, it has a 47,000 pound gross vehicle weight. It is 1,500 gallons per minute pump capacity, and it's about a 750 gallon water capacity tank that would be on that vehicle. Under Medic 2, they're looking at doing a Fraser Type 1 14-foot remount. That would be taking the existing box or Medic 2 that we have, sending it to Houston, where Fraser would completely refurbish the box and all the air conditioning, all the electrical wiring, everything is essentially brand new, and placing that box on a new chassis, which would be the 2018-19 Ford F450 diesel. It is a considerable cost savings in doing that versus buying a brand new chassis and a brand new box. And the idea here would be that Medic 2 would then be Medic 1 when it came back and was put into service, and Medic 1 now would be Medic 2 as the backup or the reserve. So in looking at Engine 1 and its replacement, we need to kind of first of all, let me back up. Yesterday or the day before, I sent all of y'all the fire department's vehicle replacement plan. And it is included within your binders as an electronic attachment that details each one of the vehicles the fire department has and why those things should or should not be replaced. There are 2 items on that list that are on that vehicle replacement plan that they wanted to replace. Again, Engine 1 and Medic 2. So why replace Engine 1? This, by the way, is a schematic of the KME pumper that they're proposing to purchase. Engine 1 that they currently have is 19 years old. As you saw in the vehicle replacement plan, it has antiquated technology. It also has a gross vehicle weight rating that is too low, meaning that currently on Engine 1, when they pack it down with equipment and they pack it down with people, that it is currently over its weight rating. I think it's over its weight rating by 2,000 pounds, which could be a liability for the city because, again, they have a weight rating for a reason. It's also had several, I should say, suspension repairs over the past few years, and finding replacement parts for this vehicle because it's 19 years old is becoming more difficult to find them. Number one, to find them, but also to find them in a timely fashion. I think one time they actually had to call in call in a part from Asia or China because that was the only place they could find it. On Medic 2, and again, if y'all have questions, I'm sure y'all will about these things. The fire chief is here and he can answer any technical questions with regard to the fire engine or the Medic 2.
Just going back to the fire engine though, I did a ride along and that will become the reserve.
Yes.
If there is a replacement, that'll become the reserve fire pumper.
Yes.
And then the new engine will become the primary.
It would become the primary. As a part of this, it's also would be a rescue pumper, and so their rescue vehicle that they currently have right now would be transferred to the Public Works Department so that they can utilize that rescue truck for Public Works operations. On Medic 2. Medic 2, what they're proposing again is the Fraser Type 1 14-foot remount with an F450 chassis. This is an interior picture of a completely refurbished ambulance. And this is from the Victoria Fire Department that shows a completely refurbished box and a brand new chassis. Why look at replacing ambulance Medic 2? First off, there's been some reliability issues with Medic 2 in the sense when it currently served as the backup. When it's down, we then have to utilize either District 7 for ambulance activities or we have to utilize Acadian. for ambulance activities. And so reliability is a concern when it comes to ambulances and fire trucks. It also has higher mileage and higher run miles, and the maintenance costs for this have continued to creep up year over year. If you recall, Medic 2 was, if I recall correctly, Medic 2 was never a new unit.
Correct.
Medic 2, when we purchased it from another agency, and so while we purchased a new Medic 1, we did not purchase Medic 2. So Medic 2 has been used by at least 2 agencies, including us. So when we're looking at this, obviously, Engine 1 is expected to run anywhere between $600,000 and $700,000, and the ambulance refurbish is expected to run about $150,000. So clearly, we can't afford this next fiscal year without taking out a debt instrument to pay them in full. And so what we have worked with thus far is Frost Bank, who has a municipal capital finance program, to see what they could do in the way of payments over a certain period of time to make it work within our budget. As you can see on this slide, you have a term in years schedule here of 5 to 15 years. 15 years is the expected useful life, the minimum expected useful life of Engine 1. As I said, ours currently is 19 years old. 7 years is an expected useful life of Medic 2 when it got refurbished. And so what I included within the budget, or what we included within the budget, was looking at the 7-year for the ambulance and the 15-year for the for Engine 1. Obviously, I like that because the payments are less, which means we can balance the budget easier. Now, the mayor has brought up several concerns about prepayment penalties, interest rates, and just not paying more in interest over a longer term than we need to. But as of right now, this $25,000 for 7 years and this $61,000 here is what is included within the budget. This, again, you're looking at annual payments in arrears or annual payments in advance. So what Frost Bank does is they give you a break if you pay them at the first of the year rather than at the end of the year. That makes sense because they get your money and they can make their own interest on it or invest it rather than waiting the full calendar year. And so they have 2 different payment options in that regard. The $659,000 is one form of the KME pumper, and the $700,000 is one form of the KME pumper. There are some engine differences here. I believe that there's probably some transmission differences there, but for purely budget numbers today, I've looked at the 700 and I've looked at the 157. Again, looking at the 7-year for the ambulance and the 15-year for the engine. The prepayment penalty, there is a prepayment penalty on 12 and 15-year terms. So if we went with a 15-year term for Engine 1, there would be a prepayment penalty on that. There would also be an ad valorem tax pledge, which is really not that concerning because essentially what it does is it states that all future councils would continue to have to make payments on the vehicle, okay? So state law with financing says that if a municipality can't afford to make payments a subsequent year, that they can return the equipment and they're under no obligation to continue to pay that, okay? It's a non-appropriations clause. With the exception of if a bank makes you pledge ad valorem tax revenue, which they know you're always gonna have, and in that case, that binds future councils from returning the equipment. Well, from a staff perspective, from the fire department's perspective, and from mine and possibly the mayor's, we don't have any intention of returning that equipment to begin with. So the ad valorem tax pledge doesn't bother me for the 15-year term. It may bother y'all as a council, though. And the prepayment penalty. The prepayment penalty for the 12 and 15-year terms could consist of yield maintenance, 17 basis points on a 12-year term, or up to 21 basis points on a 15-year term, and there would be 0 prepayment, meaning you could not prepay after 5 years. You could only prepay before the 5-year term. That's what the terms are of the Frost Bank quote that we received.
What are you envisioning the case under which you'd prepay? That you would want to prepay?
If the city just gets flush with cash somehow and we had extra reserves, then we would be able to pay that off.
I'm not worried about that one.
You never know what the future's gonna bring, but in 10 years, and the other thing is, over a 15-year period, you're gonna be paying considerably more interest than over a 10-year period. So if we can see where we could afford the 10-year payments over time, we'd be saving the city a lot of interest in that last 5 years. So that was the thought process there.
I will tell you here that although I budgeted the 61,000, the difference between the 61,000 and the 83,000 at this point doesn't scare me. And so if council decides to go with a 10-year term, if y'all decide to do it, number one, at all, and if y'all decide to do the 10-year term, then that number doesn't scare me. I can work that into a future budget. On the ambulance side, the difference, well, there is no prepayment because it's a 5 and 7. So you could either go 5 or 7. The difference there is nominal, and that doesn't scare me either. Just so you know. Now,
Can I ask another question?
yes.
It's probably the fire chief. In your, wait till he gets up here. In your presentation, you said for our ISO rating that we have to keep a CAVS pumper online. Is that correct, to keep our ISO at 2?
Yeah, theoretically, yes, and we do have a CAVS pumper in engine 3. That's our TIFMAS pumper that we obtained in 2011 under a grant.
Okay.
It does have a CAVS pump on it, so it does rate us for the ISO rating too.
For those in the audience that are not aware of what he's talking about, would you explain what a CAV is?
CAVS is basically air compressor driven injected foam in a fire pump, and its design is intended to make the pump and the foam work more efficiently and put out fire faster. There's a lot of theory around with it. There's a lot of proven science with it. It does work under the right conditions, but in most cases, when you're concerning house fires and common type fires, it's not as practical as one might think.
But is it critical to have that unit for our ISO rating?
It's a requirement.
Oh, it is a request, so it is critical.
To have a pumper within the city of this size
Okay.
that has CAVS capability, and that's why we have.
And will a new fire engine lower our ISO rating, do you think?
No.
It won't, will it? No. Okay.
No, we're at a 2 for the size community we are. It'd be very difficult, and really, to get to an ISO 1, we would probably get involved a lot more with the water system.
Okay.
A lot more public works type things will have to
Gotcha.
be involved as well. A lot less fire department, a lot more public works.
Okay.
And the city of San Antonio is a 2, by the way. So.
Yeah, it's not generally worth, it was good going from the 4 to the 2 that we're at now.
Yes.
But it's not really economically feasible to work toward going to a 1 from a 2.
Correct.
And just to be clear on this, the CAV unit is a requirement of the ISO 2 rating, but we do have a CAV unit on pumper 3
Yes.
or engine 3, and so that meets the ISO requirement. To add one to this KME, if we wanted to add it to the new one, it would add considerable expense. So between you and us and the proposal to council, we are not including the CAV unit as part of the new pumper,
That's
the new
correct.
apparatus. Okay.
So importantly, what we are asking
Thanks,
you
Chief.
tonight is there is a CAMI unit that's coming off the line in, I believe it's November. Is it November or January? It's actually
that one's
January.
been sold, the new one
Yeah,
is
the
January.
November one was sold. But we would like to get in line for that January engine delivery. At the same time, we would like to get Medic 2 refurbished as quickly as possible. And so what we are asking y'all tonight, if y'all are so obliged, is to direct staff and Mayor Schoolcraft to proceed with financing at or below these rates and include them in the budget for next fiscal year. So what that would mean is we could then, with your blessing, contract for both an ambulance refurbishment and also Engine 1 now in anticipation of us adopting this budget at the end of September.
So what you're asking for is a vote that would say, subject to the budget passing, that we would move forward on those two vehicles.
It would just be direction that that would be required, stating that y'all, and essentially knowing full well that y'all are then committing to include at least those two line items in next year's budget so that we can make our first year's payment.
And just also just let them know on the chassis for the Medic 2 that we're intending to repurpose the old chassis and bring it over also to Public Works.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So, in front of you, you'll have a binder, and I wanted to go through this binder quickly to kind of just orient you to how this binder is put together. On the front page of the binder, you have the budget cover sheet. This is required by state law, and it talks about how much property tax revenue we expect to receive additional that we didn't receive last year. It also itemizes our property tax rate, our proposed property tax rate for next fiscal year, the effective tax rate, the effective maintenance and operations tax rate, the rollback tax rate, and the debt tax rate. The debt tax rate is already set. Basically, the Bexar County, although you still have to approve it at the end of September, we can't change that. That is what Bexar County has said you have to collect in order to make your debt service payments, just so you know. I don't think I've ever explained that in the past. This binder is has been tabbed A through Q, and each section is a different section of the budget binder, and it corresponds to the table of contents that we have in the front. Under A, you'll see Mayor Schoolcraft's budget message, which includes many of the things that we've talked about tonight, and it's addressed to the individual city council members. Under tab B goes through essentially a historical look at where we've come from in the city and where we are currently. It talks about the history, the population of Helotes. It looks at our hierarchies that we have here in the city. It talks about general fund balances, tax revenue by sources, so on and so forth. It's a lot of graphs. I actually find it very interesting. Particularly the last one that talks about our ad valorem tax rate compared to other municipalities. If you'll see on that chart, the city of Helotes is in green, and it is, if not on the middle, the bottom of the middle, it's at the top of the bottom 1/3, if that makes sense. So there are a considerable number of cities that have higher tax rates than us, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10
And
cities.
16 or over.
And 60, oh, you already knew that?
Yeah.
Oh, very nice. Under tab C, you'll see fiscal and budgetary policies. This is essentially how our budget is set up and what each one of those funds is set up as. It also talks about our investment policies and how we have to do an annual financial report. I will tell you on the annual financial report that our city auditor next year will be doing a slightly more intensive audit of this current fiscal year. The reason for that is in doing so, we get a comprehensive, we then qualify for a comprehensive annual financial report that they, working with us, produce, that we can then submit to the comptroller for a budget award as well. And so it should be interesting and it should be more intense this next audit year. Section D is our outstanding debt obligations that we have in the city. It details both the city and the EDC's debt payments for current day through the end of those certificate of obligations. We currently only have 2 certificates of obligation, one of 2007 and one of 2015. Last year, we paid off the 2003 certificates of obligation that funded this building. E looks at our budget overview. Again, it talks about the different funds we have and what we can or cannot do with those funds. F has all the personnel information in it. I did state in the budget presentation that we were not hiring any additional people or proposing not to hire any additional people this next fiscal year. We're actually proposing to have one less person next fiscal year because we are under the fire chief's direction. He has agreed not to hire an assistant chief or replace an assistant chief at this time. So we're going from 82 full-time equivalents down to 81.
While you were talking, I've been talking to the fire chief about maybe creating another position, an engineer's position possibly. Are you still thinking about doing that, Chief?
Yes.
Okay.
That is included in their
It
budget
is?
requests.
Oh, okay.
It's not included in the proposed budget that was given to y'all, but is included in the budget request. Importantly, on the front of y'all's notebook, and I forgot to talk about this, there's a flash drive. That flash drive has every department that submitted a budget request. It has all of that documentation in PDF form, so you can put it into your computer at home and review it. If y'all would also like, we can print those here. We just need to know what y'all want printed, and we can do that for y'all. So within Section F, again, it talks about the holidays that we're recommending, the number of positions that we're recommending to be staffed, the certification pays, and cell phone allowances and uniform allowances. We have included, by the way, $150 for council members for a uniform, essentially. So if y'all would like shirts or something, we did include that in here for a benefit to y'all, since y'all attend many events.
And that would be if they would choose to approve that in the budget, ordered just like we do for the staff with the city logo and
Yes, sir.
that on it.
I had to buy mine. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's why we're adding, everyone else has a clothing allowance or uniform allowance, so we figured why not add city council, because we're pretty cheap council in the budget anyway.
Can we do Hawaiian shirts then?
You could. That's actually a good idea.
We actually just, I know we don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I mean, we order all of our stuff through Land's End. So anything in the Land's End catalog, they already have our logo and everything. You can order anything on it, as long as it doesn't exceed $150.
Right.
Then it goes through the benefits that we're offering and the biggest cost increase in benefits, that being healthcare costs. G is the entire general fund budget. You'll notice that there is a cover sheet on the general fund budget only that talks about the revenues and the expenditures at a higher level, and then it goes into each line item within all of the department's budgets. H is the debt service fund. I is the capital replacement fund, again, where we put all of our certificates of obligation and we pay for those capital costs. J combines the municipal court security and technology fund budgets. K is the public access fund budget.
With the, I'm sorry, with the fire truck and the new, would they go under the capital equipment?
So what we included in the proposed budget was a transfer from the general fund to the capital fund in those amounts that were up on the screen, and we would pay that money out of the capital fund. But it would be a transfer of just dollars from the general fund to the capital fund, since they are capital purchases. Police training and education's under L, and so on and so forth. I don't need to go through each one of these. What I did want to call to your attention to is under P, tab P. That is the proposed municipal fee schedule for next fiscal year. We typically do adjust our fee schedule on a year-to-year basis depending on what the CPI did. And so we have increased the revenue, or excuse me, the fees on this chart 2.4%, but we rounded to the nearest dime. The only thing that we did not increase, and we didn't increase it last year, was our plan review fees and our building permit fees, because I think everybody generally agrees that those are at a level that compensate us for the level of effort that we put into those. And lastly, under Q, this is something, I haven't done this before, but what is being proposed to the Economic Development Corporation is also included within your budget packet tonight. That will go to the EDC for official discussion and their public hearings and everything at the first meeting or at the next meeting in August. So they'll have one meeting on the budget in August, and they'll have one meeting on the budget in September. Hopefully they'll approve it at their meeting in September, and that just coincidentally allows y'all to approve it at your last meeting in September when you approve all of the other budgets. And that's it, sir.
I would just like to comment on the sales tax revenue. You had mentioned in your presentation that it has estimated to go up about 15% more than what we had last year. And I would like to point out that, as always, when we look at our estimated sales tax revenue and our other fees in the budget, we base it upon our projected year-end, fiscal year-end for each previous fiscal year or current fiscal year, I guess. So we don't want to get too, as Rick said, excited about it, because it is up substantially because of the activities that are going on primarily with BMC West. And I would say that we would want to let this go for a couple of years or 3 years to be sure that that level is going to stay consistent and growing, and not get too overzealous of spending or committing ourselves to too much long-term spending in different areas. So that's just my thought on this as we move cautiously in projecting our sales tax revenue. As you know from years past, we usually hit our numbers pretty well. And in the budget message, I included some of the comments out of our TML elected officials or mayor and council members' handbooks about the budget. And so just keep in mind that the revenue's there this year, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee it's going to continue. We hope that BMC West stays here and continues helping us out, and we certainly don't mind sharing the sales tax revenue through the grant payments back to them, but we just want to be sure that it's a long-term deal.
Well,
Anyway, that's
I mean,
it.
and think about the legislative issues that
Yes.
they keep trying to drop it down to 4%. If that happens,
Well, that would be the rollback
Yeah.
rate, and yes, the legislature is working against municipalities.
yes, they are.
They have been working very hard against municipalities from limiting our ability to do certain revenue gaining activities. Keep in mind that in Texas is one of the few states, in fact, last I saw, we were 49th out of the 50 states as far as assistance from the state to municipalities. And that's why, to offset that lack of assistance, financial assistance to the municipalities, the state has allowed us to collect sales tax, to collect property tax, and to collect other fees for services throughout the year, and that's how we primarily gain our revenue, and we're able to operate the city. And the legislature, for some reason, is looking to limit our capacity or handcuff us into being able to use some of those revenue sources, and they don't seem to be coming up with any kind of alternative to allow us to replace the money that they're taking from us by other means. So we just have to wait and see what the legislature does. And that is another concern on this, and they'll be coming back into session next year. And we'll just have to wait and see what they come up with as far as new legislation that negatively affects municipalities. Anyway, that being said, Rick, excellent job.
Thank you.
He was sequestered yesterday and today working on the PowerPoint, and it was a commendable bunch of information, and we appreciate your efforts. Any questions of Rick or me about anything that was presented? Jim, you?
Do we need to formally give the direction? on the-
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
Okay?
That was my question.
Okay, very good. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question on the fiscal year budget cover page. At the bottom, it says total debt obligation for the city of Helotes secured by property taxes, and it says $9,433,974. I'm not sure where that number comes from. Is that overall?
Yeah, that's the balance of the two C of O issuances. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that was the, if I recall, $10 million from the 2007 issuance. 6 million went to the police and fire departments, construction, and 4 million went to the Old Town improvements. And then the 2015 was the most recent, which was a little over 4 million. So that is what is left, principal and interest, over the next, I'd have to look exactly, but 15 to 20 years of payments.
Yeah, in section D, you have the summary of outstanding debt obligations, and you have the amortization schedules for each of the C of Os issued.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out how to put the is the 700,000 suggested budget item for the fire department truck, is that'll be a debt obligation as well?
It'll be.
What do you call that?
It would not be included in the debt.
Right.
It would not be included in that cover sheet because it's not a bond or it's not a certificate of obligation or a tax note.
And
it is essentially a capital lease with a dollar buyout
Okay,
at the end.
but it becomes that if we decide to go with the 12 or 15 year, because then we're obligating tax
Correct.
revenues, which I don't want to do, so.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
Just a comment for Rick, if he thinks he has headaches now, that on the news tonight, right before we came over, San Antonio announced their $2.8 billion budget and a 0.55 tax rate, so that was all on the evening news.
0.55 tax increase?
No, just they're staying at the same rate,
They're not increasing their tax rate either.
but it's a little higher than ours and a little larger budget.
Well, if you look there on that chart, and they're close to the top, the suburban city that has the highest property tax rate is Kirby, and at the opposite end is Von Ormy with a 0%, property tax rate.
So two.
Yeah. But it is interesting. Each year, we've stayed pretty consistent. There are 26 other municipalities in Bexar County, and we're always in that 9 or 10 below us. So we've stayed pretty steady. Okay, and then with this, there shouldn't be a motion required. Like Rick said, it's just a direction, and for lack of a better way to do it, I would just ask for a consensus, perhaps, of council to let us go ahead and proceed. If you are amenable to looking at the purchase of this new fire apparatus and the refurbishing of Medic 2, then we can go ahead and begin that process so that we'll have a better chance at securing that January apparatus. Typically, in ordering an apparatus from scratch, it takes, and the chief can correct me if I'm wrong, but at least a year.
10 months to a year.
Yeah, to have that produced. The November truck was so close to what we're looking at specifying that we were excited about it. It went somewhere else, so they have another one comparable to that would meet our needs coming out in January. So we're trying to just get in line and get a commitment on that truck. So if you guys, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just, if we wait till then we're looking at, we're going to have to wait till then. We're looking at a 20-year-old fire truck that, God forbid, something happens to one of our residents, and and our fire truck fails. I just don't know how we can explain it to them. Then why do you have a 20-year-old fire truck? And another good thing about this fire truck, it's also going to be turned into a rescue pumper, and you'll be able to deactivate the rescue vehicle, and you can keep your guys together. I think this is a no-brainer. We almost have to do this.
Okay, keep in mind too, there are departments that have apparatus that are older than this, but they all have the same problem of finding parts. And that's the main thing, the technology issue and the parts. And it is becoming more of a maintenance burden on the city and the fire department. So anyway, if we can, I guess the best way is just, anybody gonna be opposed to this as part of the budget? We've shown you that it works in the budget's balanced with those payments as defined by Rick, and what we're projecting is, we'll actually come up with, a price on the apparatus, that will be less than the 700,000. It'll be somewhere between that six and 700,000 probably, and that includes all the miscellaneous equipment that goes with the pumper, so it'll be a turnkey unit.
I have no opposition from this end. I did do that ride along and saw all the equipment firsthand, and it is time. We need the new equipment, so I think it's a good timing on it.
Okay, Alex, any thoughts from you?
No, I'm completely in favor of both of them. I do think, however, that we have to consider the issue of the term of the note, and I would be in favor of going with the 10-year number for two reasons. One, I don't want to see us have to make that commitment. I know that we're going to make our payments, not going to return it anyway, but I think it's the right thing to do. Plus, I did the math on that, and it's $90,000 worth of interest between the 10 and the 15-year note, and that's a lot of interest that we would have to pay out extra just to have the luxury of $20,000 a year in savings.
Yeah,
I don't see the benefit of that. If we can get it in the budget, my recommendation is do both of them, absolutely. Go with the 10-year note on the one and the 7-year on the ambulance.
Right. Bert?
Okay. What will we have to drop if we go to the 10-year note on the fire engine?
Well, that was in the,
No, what will we have to drop anything else out of the budget?
$20,000.
20,000.
I mean, what would you,
22,000.
where would you take that, since it's balanced right now, where would you take that from, if I can ask? Or are you gonna,
Well, it's our budget, we need to
It-
tell them.
well, I mean, I wanna hear his
Well, I
ideas.
mean, I can
it's
tell
just a
you that-
transfer of more out of the general fund into the capital fund.
No, we haven't transferred, we haven't dove into reserves on this proposed budget at all. Let me just give you a quick analogy. When we started this process, we were about $700,000 in the hole, then we went down to $500,000 in the hole, and this happens every year. So $20,000 doesn't scare me, and we can certainly figure out how to balance the budget without that
Yeah,
20,000.
yeah, we'll look at that.
Can I ask another?
Yeah,
I-
sure.
but I
The lease
hesitate-
agreement we agreed to tonight, obviously, we're not gonna get all of that, but that's $24,000. Was that already budgeted?
Yeah,
Or- okay.
we're really not committing to any lease agreement. We're still negotiating and looking at the price of the unit.
No. I meant the lease on the new tower will
Oh.
generate $24,000 a year. Was that $24,000 expected revenue anticipated to be coming in during
That
this
is,
fiscal
I
year?
included all the tower stuff within this
Okay,
proposed budget.
including the new one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, maybe I found you some money.
Good thought.
Still a third time.
But it really, like Rick says, the 20,000, yeah, it's very workable, and it's not gonna mean taking anything critical out of anything. It's your budget, so you can certainly recommend, but what we typically do is next time we come in, we'll have all those numbers and have it balanced for you again. And we can tell you exactly what we did. Fair enough?
Yes, sir.
Anything else? Paul?
No, I had the same thought as Alex, to just go with a shorter term. But I'm all in favor of replacing those units.
Yeah,
Cynthia?
I'm in agreement. This-
Okay.
What Alex said.
So we'll go ahead and start the process, but it'll still be in the budget and be included in the, approving the budget. Okay, that takes care of, that. Okay, next up, we have number 15.
We could certainly do another ambulance.
Which is discussion of an action on placing a proposal to adopt an ad valorem tax rate for tax year 2018 on the September 27th, 2018 regular meeting agenda of the City Council of Helotes. So we'll look for a motion and a second to discuss and take action on this.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion, we discuss and take action on 15.
We have a motion from Buys. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Fredericks.
Okay. Sorry.
And again, just as a reminder, we do this every year, and you have several options. Basically, it's to just go ahead and if at this point, you agree with keeping the tax rate at 35 cents per $100 of valuation, then you have that option of setting that with this agenda item. If you want to give yourself the leeway and at this time set it at the rollback rate of 36.3601 cents, that does not commit you to that rollback rate. It only is saying that you can go anywhere from that 36 or lower when you approve the rate the end of September when you approve the budget. So it depends on your confidence of whether you want to keep it at 35 and you can make that decision tonight, or if you want the latitude of working anywhere under the 36.3601, which is the rollback rate. So that's where
Mayor,
we're
are
at.
you saying that if we do set the stay where it is rate, that we could not change it between now and the budget time? Is that your comment?
Basically, that's the way it works. So,
Okay, that's fine.
So that's why historically, at this point, it's set at the rollback rate to allow you to have a decision-making process between now and the time the budget's approved, and they generally wind up at that 35-cent recommended rate that we have in the budget message. Okay, so Bert, it's you're up on the discussion.
Well, normally I get shot down on this, but I'd like to have it at the rollback rate at 0.363601. And then we can always drop it back down.
Paul?
I concur.
Okay. Cynthia?
That's fine.
Jim?
I have no problem with that.
Alex?
I'm surprised. I was thinking we'd do exactly what we did the last 2 years in a row. And that is, he makes the motion, and
didn't get
Cindy and
shot
I
down
oppose
this
it,
time.
and then we end up going to 35 cents at this meeting. So,
Yes.
No, I don't remember that. I think
Yes,
we.
every
yeah.
year. That's why I
it's
say it
been
gets shot
several years
down
in a
every
row
year.
that way.
Oh, you do?
Gotta throw in a wrench every now and then, just
Yeah,
something different.
I don't see the and maybe I'm the only one here, because I don't see that the aggravation or consternation it might cause even for one or two people to think that there's possibility of going up is worth the possibility of the $44,000 that it might generate. But if the unanimous wants to go with the 36, et cetera, I guess I'll comply. But I think in the end, we're gonna be at the 35 cents, because I don't think that the difference in revenue warrants that change.
Well, actually, looking at the numbers, the difference between the current 35 cents per hundred and the rollback rate of 36.3601, that's a total of 1.3601 cents per hundred, which would actually, if you set it at the rollback rate, it would actually bring in an additional $119,568 in revenue. But we don't need that.
Right.
And always keep in mind, it's the perception out there, we don't need to take money from our citizens and taxpayers if we don't need it. And so that's why the recommendation is to keep it at 35 cents a hundred. And I know it's already on Facebook that we're gonna increase the rate to there, so keeping it at 35 cents tonight would quell all that, but it's up to you guys.
I knew I was gonna get shot down again.
I'm just pointing that out.
I'd
So-
like to keep it at 36, but
Okay.
it's whatever everybody else wants to do.
Paul, any follow-up on that?
I'm good with keeping it 36.
Cynthia?
Well, now that we've had the discussion, I think you're right, because we're gonna go to 35. And the other thing too is, property taxes have gone up quite a bit this year, so that 35 cents is still gonna bring in that extra revenue. How much
Property
did you say it
valuations,
was?
property valuations.
Property
have gone up, yeah.
valuations. It's gonna bring in
Yeah, the
enough.
numbers are solid.
Loser.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go back, I'm against.
I knew you
just
would.
Keep it. Keep it. Well, that's what we're here for, to discuss, and
You're-
then we can change our minds if we want to.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, you can just settle it
Let's just settle it.
in the taxpayers' minds, that dadgummit, you're okay with the budget and you're okay with keeping the tax rate the same. Jim, any follow-up?
Yeah, I don't think the long version is gonna make any blogs or Facebooks. So the heat for doing something, we're gonna roll back anyhow, in 60 days is not worth the consternation. Sorry, Bert.
Okay, I amend my motion to go ahead and,
Well, wait a minute, Alex.
Oh,
may
I'm
have some
sorry.
follow-up.
Excuse
Alex?
me.
I think 35 says is the right way to go.
I knew
now,
I was
since
gonna-
We're all gonna be there. anyway.
So you want to amend your motion to go ahead and
just like
set
I've done the last
set the tax
3
rate at
years.
35 cents?
Yes, I'll do it. I know I'm gonna lose again. Yes, I'll amend my
You good?
motion. Yes.
Paul, are you okay with seconding that
I'll
amendment?
second it.
And Mayor, recall, this is a recorded vote. This is a recorded vote. It has to be.
It's a recorded vote? Okay. Cynthia, any follow-up? You're okay with that?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. And it is, as Rick pointed out, a recorded vote, which means we'll do it by roll call. So we'll start out with place one. Jim?
In favor of the amended.
This will be,
the
yes,
amended motion.
we're asking the question whether you're for or against. So you'd go yes or no.
Yes,
You're yes?
yes.
Okay. Alex?
Yes.
Bert?
Yes.
Speak up into the mic, please.
God.
Cynthia?
This is for the amended motion, or
Yes.
going back to
35
35, yes.
35?
Yes,
Paul?
35.
Yes.
Okay, so we have 5 yes votes for the record to go ahead and set the property tax ad valorem tax rate for tax year 2018 for this upcoming fiscal year to keep it at 35 cents per $100 valuation. So thank you, council, for that, and we appreciate it. Okay, 16 is simply setting the required public hearing dates. This is discussion of an action on setting public hearings on the proposed tax year 2018 ad valorem tax rate on the August 23rd, 2018, and September 13th, 2018 regular meeting agendas. So if we can have a motion and a second to set these public hearing dates as read, I would ask for that now.
We let Bert do that so we could have a win.
In case he wants to amend it,
I'm not making the motion.
do we have a motion then?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we discuss and take action on 16 as written.
I'll second that. So the
So
Bert
we have
doesn't
a,
have to.
we have a motion from Fredericks and a second from Blue. So, Paul, you have any discussion on that, or we're just setting the public hearing date?
I'm fine with the dates.
Okay, Alex?
I think we should do them.
Okay, Jim?
Fine.
Good, Bert?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
So no further discussion required. We'll call the question. All in favor of approving the proposed public hearing dates, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. And by golly, that takes us to the end of our agenda. So I would ask if there are any objections to adjourning. If there are no objections, we will adjourn. Any objections? None heard. We are adjourned at 9:02.